I thought chapter was going to be more in a like dedicated style on Mimi and against Lucy, just because the way that it ended, obviously with Lucy, and Lucy says the only 1v1, and out of the like main group in a 1v1, Lucy is in power level wise she's the weakest, because she's more of the her variety and the fact she's the smartest. She's not as like power heavy, like kind of much of a fighter, and she's up against Mimi, who just design wise I think people can assume that she would be like a very heavy fighting kind of like person, whatever her ability is. And this chapter, called Spiritual Arts, it's giving us information on this brand new branch, because like I mentioned in the last review, because the last chapter, like the whole stuff about Superior and Spiritual Arts, whatever Superior is in the officials, we'll just go with Superior for now, maybe it's dead on, who knows. Either way, like, this is a whole new branch of power within the series. It's like when Jackal introduced curses to us. We knew that like there was stuff like the idea of curses in the series, but curses like utilized and explored was brand new, and now we have a whole new power system like at the disposal of the Elentier people. And I'm still really curious on what the origins of like these Moonlit Beauty gods are. Like, are they all the same level? Like, is there a hierarchy system? Are they human? Because there's the question about these, and what's her name, Yoko, like her whole yokai stuff. If like, is she a yokai? Are they yokai, or is her power specifically summoning yokai? Because that seems to be the one that makes sense after this chapter. But we'll get to her stuff in a minute. But the whole stuff with Mimi, I figured out of the fights that are set up, like you have Natsu and Gray, against Hakune, and she to me is the most interesting. She's the one I'm most interested to see fight. And then you have Urza and Wendy against Yoko, and then Mimi versus Lucy. So Lucy in this fight, like hers being the first and the easiest, because one fight is against Natsu and Gray, like the strongest two members of the team, and then another one of this against Urza and Wendy. Though Urza is still really powerful, you have a very utility-based fighter, a very utility combat-based person, and then Wendy, who on top of being pretty strong, is also an amazing support. So they are very dangerous together. So Yoko I figured would be kind of the middle area, and then Hakune the boss, because on top of Hakune's kind of fight advantage like thing that she's got going, or I guess disadvantage that she would have rather, against Natsu, with fire, and Gray as an ice devil slayer. Like on top of this, the general elemental stuff, like Gray can eat ice attacks, and Natsu can has dragon fire, he can burn magic and stuff. They have their own abilities on top of the straight elemental advantages going into that fight. Plus Gray's resistance is just in general would be good. But Mimi, like, she just looks like a big thug. Like, obviously not, like, she doesn't look dumb. I mean, and the idea of just, like, the way she fights. Because she's, like, just this very well, not even, like, she's huge. She's gigantic. She has to be, like, 10 feet tall or something. Or something like that. Like, 8 to 10 feet tall. But she just looks like she's a melee fighter. And I'm really hoping her power is more complex than that. Because not just the fact that these guys are strong, like these guys are way further in the series than somebody whose power is just like, oh, I use spiritual arts to make my body just physically stronger, or way too there's way too high level of a tier threshold that these characters have to be at for that to be the case. I mentioned like an idea of like, what if her power like locks herself into like a terrain, like just imagine like a space of so far like a couple miles, like moving her is like trying to move that much weight of like that big of a terrain, and then you'd maybe have some like really cool thing with that, because it'd be like a really complicated and powerful way to have a simple kind of ability at the same time. Of thinking this idea of maybe the immovable. But I'm wondering if her thing, like I'm probably overthinking this, because like I said, these guys have to be all very powerful in their abilities, and it's not just like the degree of the characters that the main characters are at, because otherwise these guys would be fodder. Like the only other way that they would be able to contend with them is if the main cast was either not do anything or they're fodder. Like these guys are strong, they're able to contend with them, but on top of that, they're minions of Selene. So unless it's like somewhere in Eden Zero recently, we had Nero's like the first of his minions. We had Beast, like the first bad guys were able to push the main cast pretty fairly, and they were like B Squad 6 group, and they're actually the bottom tier of a branch that isn't even like the elite force of their group. It's something like that with these guys, because they can be strong. Like we see in this chapter, Yoko is strong, and I'm guessing Kukune is going to be pretty strong, because I still think Kukune is the strongest out of the three of them. But Mimi has to be, she's got to have something good. It can't just be I'm very physically strong. That's boring. It could easily be that just because we don't know what her power is and there's been nothing special on display. But I think it would just be almost like a fast stamp under a character of being irrelevant, unless her physical strength is absurd. Unless it's kind of like, you know, when you look at series that just go over like the top when it comes to physical strengths. Like if anyone's ever read Toriko and you see like some of the physical strength feats of that series of characters just lifting ungodly amounts of weight, but anything like that, like it would have to be absurd for it to really fit. Like maybe not like that where it's like, oh, she's lifting a continent above her head or something ridiculous. No, I mean like it would have to at least be like she can pick up mountains like they're nothing, and like, you know, like I don't know, it has to be such a big display because we know what Spriggan level people are, and we know Lucy from 100, like in Alvarez, Lucy was in that tier. She was kind of like in that lower, really low Spriggan, maybe kind of like upper Wizard Saint level of power, and so we know that she should be within around that level, that kind of like Spriggan level now for sure. And I just feel like if her opponent is literally just I'm big and I'm physically strong, all she has to do is say, okay, Gemini, and then Gemini dresses and has Gemini, and then it's essentially 2 with this absurd strength against 1 with this absurd strength. I think it has to be something even crazier. So I was looking at this chapter and like, what if her whole thing is actually spatial, like a spatial weapon? And the reason this is, again, it's kind of like a big jump in the idea of her power, like, hey, physical stronger than a spatial weapon. But the reason I think this is, at least in the idea, because I am using a Selene minion as a partial reason why it has to be a good power, but I think it's justification for it. But one thing we haven't seen yet, but we know is a thing now, because they're an Ellen tier where magic is way more potent, is to what extent the characters are stronger at. Like what new things can each of them do? Like we saw Wendy enchant Spirior into her and Urza's magic. That's something we've seen so far that Wendy could do, like just as a higher level of enchantment. And then Lucy, we saw how without even having her keys on her, which I'm still wondering how she's gonna get them back. I'm super curious if she's gonna get them back this arc or what, or if she's gonna try, like, get so used to doing it this way that maybe when she gets back she'll just be able to do it normally, which would be really cool, just as a way to upgrade her character. But right now she can summon her spirits without her keys, and she doesn't even have to do it intentionally. Like they can summon themselves. And the thing about that reason I said spatial, like a spatial weapon for Mimi, is think about this, like Lucy's magic at the base root of it, even though it's summoning spirits that has different abilities, it's still spatial magic. We saw that in the fight with Myron Hollow when he was against Urza and Lucy, because you know both of their magics are a type of spatial magic, and his thing cancels out other spatial magic users. Because again, at the end of it, at the very root way that celestial spirit magic works is a type of spatial magic. So what if what Lucy does in this fight is, because here where she's summoning her spirits without her keys, clearly now that means she has a better grasp on spatial magic itself. would she be able to counteract Mimi's spatial magic? And maybe that's how she would beat her. Because what if Mimi is holding in place like through spatial magic? Like she's like spatially making it so you can't move her. Like she's literally manipulating herself in one spot via spatial magic and or spatial abilities of the spiritual arts, because this is a whole new style of ability. It's not magic. Seems to have spells from what Yoko says. I'm kind of hoping that that's just like the fan translation, and like maybe the official translation will have chants or something where it's not like just the same as spells, because we know spells are a thing with magic, whereas curses are something completely different. So I want the spiritual arts to have their own kind of just wording and specifics. Like, you know, they already have Spirior instead of Ether Nano, so just a couple like very basic like root things like that being different, I think would be really, you know, much needed just in the general exploration of that branch. But then I think it would make sense because like Mimi, like I like the idea of Mimi like having this spatial sword, so it'd be like, oh, she's got a kind of basic way of fighting but with a hacks ability, but Lucy overcomes her, like she's able to counteract her immovable sword like through spatial magic, and then like it just pretty much nullifies it, and maybe is able to move over, like tip over Mimi through canceling out her spatial manipulation, something like that. I'm really hoping just Mimi isn't I'm physically strong, because that again, unless it's an absurd level of physical strength, and again I mentioned like you'd have to like get to like lifting mountain ranges or something ridiculous when you really look at like current level characters, because current level characters, like we know that Ikusa Tsunagi was nothing to a Spriggan, so like I still think, even though power, like talking about power levels, like I don't like going too much into like power level stuff in my reviews because I know most people don't care about that, but I do believe story wise it is important to be consistent. So I think that there should definitely be like a level of consistency when displaying characters. Like I don't want Mimi to be trying to lift up something that's 10 tons and struggle, when we know of like that shouldn't be a problem at all. When we saw like a Hades level person grab Titan Makarov, who's like a mile tall, and pull him to the ground, like like Natsu's Demolition Fist, when we see it like destroy Ikusa Tsunagi and any other giant feats, and then we see it hit Madmol, and Madmol just pretty much staying there because his defense is so high. We know that anybody who, if it's strong enough to hit Madmol and move him just on sheer physical strength, we know that that has to be like a massive attack. It's not just gonna be like, oh, he just beats this guy. It sets a precedent. Whereas like here, there has to be like a level of consistency if you do that. It's like a nitpicking thing, but I look at it just from the idea of what happens in this story. So I'm hoping Mimi isn't something so basic. And I think my idea, though, it might sound a little like it's a little kind of overthinking it right now. Like maybe it could happen, maybe it couldn't. But like I said, it's something that I think could work. And on top of like the fact that Lucy is by herself, and like we haven't seen the full extent of like their Elantir boots, it is a Lucy only fight, so it's gonna be Lucy focused. Like I said, Lucy focused, so it's gonna be a moment for her to shine without like, you know, sharing with someone else, because I'm fine with the other ones, like an Urza and Wendy fight. I'm gonna enjoy that. Natsu and Gray, I'm gonna really like that. I'm just really hoping Hukuni is handled well, like that fight in specific is handled well, which I'll get to when I get to that part of the chapter. But the Lucy fight, I think, is to be cool, because I do like that Lucy is still keeping up with them, because she doesn't have like, you know, she's not a Dragon Slayer or have like this crazy past. Like her family has crazy connections, but Lucy for the most part grew up pretty, like, you know, she just grew up as a rich kid, and then like up until like joining the main cast, she lived a pretty just a very combination of stress and luxurious life, I would imagine, like, but she didn't live a crazy life. And where she's at now, it's like it's cool to see her just keep up and still kind of climbing the ladder. So I think hers would be really cool, and I do think we need to see something from all of them. Like it's a little bit weird that Urza, if she does stay down this, like after this part at the end of the chapter, if she stays down, like we're not gonna see whatever her upgrade is, like what her Elantir like new thing, her boost is, until after. It's a really weird thing that Mishima did near the end, but I'm kind of expecting Urza and Wendy to get back up Like Wendy's, it's the fact that I'll get to that part at the end, because there's like some weird specifics when it comes to that part of the chapter. But I am looking forward to the Lucy fight. I think this is going to be really cool. I don't expect hers to be like super difficult, but I want hers just to give her like a really good moment and advance her powers in like a good way. Because I really am hoping for Elantir. This is one thing I want to just mention before moving on. Elantir holds the potential to do what I always disliked about Edelus, and that is to use some special trait of this world, you know, Edelus not having magic, whereas Elantir's a boosted magic, to boost the characters. Like, I always wish that somehow using the magic weapons in Edelus had the characters, like, maybe learn some new way to use their power or something, but it never did. Like, it's like something that didn't need to happen on the arc, but I wish it did, whereas this arc, I feel like they're going to. We've already seen a little bit kind of noted with Wendy and Lucy, so I'm hoping we see also stuff with Natsu, Gray, and Urza, but I'm hoping Elantir gives us this. So I really like this. But the stuff with Mimi's interesting. I'm hoping she's not fodder. Like, if she's throwaway fodder, then that's going to be unfortunate, just because I feel like she seems like she's going to be an entertaining character, and I like her design. She's gigantic. And so a series like One Piece, like a really big character like this is normal, but like it's really weird to think about. Fairy Tail doesn't have many characters like this. Like, when we have big characters, it's usually dragons or giants, but just a big person like this is pretty rare. So I'm hoping it's either like get her out of here fast or help her stick around. I don't want her to be a character that drags on and then becomes irrelevant shortly after meeting her, kind of thing. Unless it's just the fight. But the stuff with Akune, like, I thought this was more comedic. Like, I'm gonna just pretty much brush over this part pretty quickly, because it's so easy, but it was funny to watch. So Hakune, like, starts out, she uses her powers, like, the thing about, like, Yoka that I mentioned, it's really weird, because I don't know what she's referring to specifically, because Mimi's is something I don't know, but I'm pretty sure Hakune's character is modeled after, you know, one of those Japanese snow women. I don't remember what they're called off the top of my head, but it's like these women in the snow that like lure you to like you to freezing to death or something. But you know the concept. There's probably somebody listening that knows the specifics, but she makes like these snow versions of, like, you know, characters, you know, like she's like says it's like women in your heart. But with Juvia like is just Gray is just looking at Juvia in that way. But Natsu's is different, and I think Natsu's is where things kind of like got people complicated in like this layout, because you have to have, the thing is, you have to look at this scenario really specific to these characters, and I think this is the weird thing that I think that most people can easily miss. So when it comes to the way that they see it, like, Gray is very quickly, like, you know, going with, oh, knowing this is Juvia, because he catches on to it, and with him, Gray is an ice wizard primarily, so like this is something that's very close to him, ice in the shape of Juvia, and the effect Hakune says is that even though you know they're dolls, like it's like a type of charm magic, you know, and it just keeps you away from that fact and makes you kind of are caught by them. And I'm guessing what they do is they would kind of freeze you as they're kind of latching onto you and climbing all over you. But with Gray's just the fact that it's ice, I feel like he would just notice if it wasn't Juvia and it was like a different character, it's really close to him, and it just was like a different individual coming into this effect, like it would work, just because Gray like tying to ice so closely, I feel like it would just be natural in his senses, combining who he thinks it is with it being ice, that it would just overwhelm him. But it being Juvia, I think he, like, him noticing, oh yeah, like Juvia's much crazier than this, just like in an endearing way, I thought was nice. I thought that was just a really neat way. But it was with Natsu and the girls in his, because Natsu, like, the women that it brings up are women in the guild. And when it was like Natsu, or like when it was like Lucy coming up for Natsu and Lizana, I'd be like, okay, because like the Lizana thing is still kind of, existed in his past. Like that was like the thing about Lisanna, like she just didn't do anything for the most part after coming back. But like you have Urza, like which was only like a ship early in the series, like after Tower of Heaven, like because when Natsu is carrying Urza out and people like their dynamic, but obviously we now know that is not allowed. But like Kana and Mira Jane was really weird, and Wendy, and it was with Natsu. It's the way that he thinks about them. He thinks of them as, you know, as their friends. He loves them as the concept of friends, but not he loves them as friends. Because with Lucy, we know Natsu has feelings for Lucy. We know that the way that Mishima has described it, because Mishima has said like with Natsu, you could tell like the girlfriend would be like somebody that could embarrass him, kind of like she would have that effect on him. She'd be able to kind of actually get past Natsu's like odd nature. Because even if this was like a normal person, like just in the idea of a normal person, like even like all these hot chicks that you'd know, even if you're good friends with them, doing this to you would be really awkward, but you'd still probably be bothered by it. You'd be like, oh shit, like, you know, like still flustered. But Natsu isn't, because Natsu thinks of them as, you know, essentially as family. It's really weird for him, but the one he's bothered by is Lucy, because Natsu's able to not be affected by it because he's relying more on this sense of smell. So it's over, he like his Dragon Slayer ability and Gray's it's pretty much ingrained in his DNA at this point, but pretty much his senses, but plus the way that he knows them and the way he thinks about them is different. And Gray just being used to Juvia and the way that Juvia is, and this one just not behaving properly, then getting past that, I thought was really cool. But I thought it was funny because a bunch of shippers were upset just the image of Natsu shoving a fake Lucy out of the way exists, but it's like, when it's a fake Lucy from an enemy, and Natsu, like it not smelling like Lucy would bother Natsu, because Natsu is a Dragon Slayer. Like they rely way more, like they rely a lot on their sense of smell, and he knows Lucy's smells, so it would just be a void in it's like the idea of just like if you just had a feeling, like a positive feeling around somebody, and then being around them one day and it's just not there. There's just kind of like a base root thing that would bother you about it. So Natsu shoving the fake Lucy away made complete sense. But Hokune is where my big interest is, because I talked about it a little bit in the last week's review, so I'm not going to go too much into it in this. But when it comes to Mimi versus Lucy, that fight is very unknown at the moment, because like I said, we don't know exactly what Mimi's ability does. Like it could be very complicated, like I kind of theorize, just in like the idea of a couple pieces fitting together, or it could be very basic and she could just, you know, be very strong, or like some like other special things on top of it. You know, there's variables there. And then Yoko versus Ursa and Wendy, and it either could continue and we don't know how it'll go, or that it could be over now and we'd have no idea how it's going, like if there's gonna be a follow-up. But Gray and Natsu versus Hakune is the odd one, as I've mentioned, because Natsu and Gray are the strongest people on the team. Nobody can deny that Natsu isn't the strongest member of the team. Like the fact he can just pop Dragon Force, stuff he did to Aldrin and whatnot, he's the strongest on the team. And his fight with Zeref and whatnot, you know, and Acnologia, like all these big people that Urza can't compare to. And Gray just being able to keep up with the partial Aetherius form Natsu, and what we saw, all the attacks he took, Urza could barely take one of them from just like touching that Natsu flame. Like, you know, it just burned her hand when she got in the middle between Gray and Natsu. So we know that Gray is stronger than Urza. We don't know what his like current new thing is, or like when his new upgrade is going to be, because he's the only one that hasn't gotten an upgrade out of the team in some way, shape, or form since 100 Years Quest happened, and we're 71 chapters in. It's really weird because Gray's had some fights and had a lot of really good character development. We had a lot of like good stuff with Gray, but we haven't had anything from like the side of his powers, and we even had like a full Gray loss with his fight with Scullion. Like he stood, as we saw, like at least in that moment, Scullion had him checkmated. Like there was Gray, unless he had some limit break kind of like upgrade to his Devil Slayer form, I don't really know what Gray could have done to win that scenario, because whether he has more magic than Scullion is different, because, you know, he's got a curse, like Devil Sling is like part magic, part curse at the same time, but it's more of just the fact that Scullion had him that hacks technique. But Gray Ray and Natsu both at the same time against somebody who has ice and cold based powers. And again, like I mentioned, both Natsu and Ray have individual resistances and advantages over Hakune from an elemental standpoint. But like I said, Hakune fighting the strongest two main characters makes sense if the fact that in her title she has the moon. What was her thing? It was like snow, moon, and flowers. And who does she work for? Selene, the moon dragon god. She is a god level dragon in moon dragons, because the dragons themselves are like a branch of their species. So, you know, we have other fire dragons and different kinds of fire dragons, you know, Igneal, Atlas Flame, and stuff. And then we have Ignea, who, you know, achieved dragon god tier. And then we have Selene. And even if we only see a dragon type of, you know, we see a dragon of one type like Alderon once, like only one wood dragon god, we know that there were more, but he's the peak of them. He's the complete top, and that's what Selene is. So somebody holding the title of Moon, of your boss, who is the pinnacle of the species, the point where people call her a god, carrying that same title has to be important. And Hakune's form looks cool too. Like, I really like it. Like, I know there's like the fact that she's, you know, built thick, like she's not like super, she's not as like somebody when you see just heavy levels like Kyoka, but she's built at that kind of just fine standard of, we want to just have a nice big like busted and like nicely like shaped chick, regardless of the sex appeal type stuff going into like what her design. I'm not even counting that. I like the form. I really like the form a lot. Like her like snowflake kind of thing, and it was a snowflake or a flower in her hair. I'm trying to remember exactly with her design, but her like elongated version looks way better. I like or I think it was the flower and the snowflake, but either way, like growing out like that, like very like large in size to the point it looks like a piece of like armor in a way, like a war, like a combat ornament type deal, I think is really cool. I think in the form, her facial tattoo or facial marking looks a lot better, and then the outfit itself I think looks really cool. I think that the back piece like trailing behind her looks great, the gloves, and then like the necklace like piece, I don't know what that like choker or whatever, and then the ornament and then the ornament like on top of like her, what would they be called, like like, you know, it's pretty much boob armor essentially, but it's like a battle bra or something essentially. It looks good. I'm not even counting the sex, but I think the design looks really good. And I'm expecting a lot from her. I'm really hoping that her abilities are really good, because again, not only is her general design good, I think her idea, her as the strongest out of this group and the leader going against Natsu and Gray, is going to be really good. We can get a lot out of this that like is such a mystery of how Natsu and Gray are going to be at a disadvantage, but also how are they going to get around that disadvantage, and what do they gain out of this fight? Because I expected all of them to win these with their, you know, whatever their boosts and abilities they gain in Elentier. The fact that seemingly Urza and Wendy lose at the end is a surprise. I'm fine with it, because again, at the end of the day, that people don't realize, because I saw people like really upset, like Urza fans upset. I get the idea of being upset, like somebody you really like loses. That happens from time to time, but these are dragon god level people. We saw how broken the god seeds were, but the thing about the god seeds is they were just hacks. They didn't really have a lot of fighting abilities. The closest was Metro, who was just big heavy mass summons, and that's like their powers were good, but they weren't the best fighters themselves. And they literally just got up. They just got up from a 300-year sleep. As far as we know, like, they never came up before the Lacrima, like, that were keeping Alderon asleep and keeping him tired and resting. As far as we know, the god seeds never showed up while they were active. And I think that makes sense, because these guys are definitely trained. They're definitely better. The forms that that Yoko makes, I actually really like, because I'm just gonna go through them pretty quickly because they're easy to understand. Like, she makes this like bandage thing, because her thing are all these different summons, and they're like Japanese folklore thing, monsters. I really like that. I think that's pretty cool. She makes like this cloth monster that's like something that apparently like it like strangles you, and it just looks really neat the way the part of the cloth makes the mouth. And then like this chariot, it says it's like a creature from hell that like comes and takes corpses and brings them down to hell. And then this big smoke monster, I think, is really neat looking. It's one of those ones that's basic, but it's just so oddly presented and such a neat design to look at that it's just tantalizing. I do like that way that Urza is just gazing up at this big lumbering cloud creature, but it having like this smoke that takes them out pretty quickly. There's a couple things about that I think people need to still consider. The idea of Wendy dealing with this would be, I think it's specific when it comes to what ability it is from a standpoint of the power itself. Because with smoke, the thing about smoke is that's like the exact counter to Wendy. Legitimately, that is like Wendy's kryptonite in a power sense, because Wendy eats air. Like Wendy essentially is like a massive connoisseur of oxygen, and it's weird to think about, but we know that the Dragon Slayers like taste their elements, their attributes with a flavor. So with Wendy, you know, and I have seen Wendy do it. Wendy, to her, like smoke would probably, like the idea of even inhaling smoke is probably like eating garbage, and it's bad for you on, you know, a chemical standpoint. It's going to poison you. And then we don't know what other abilities it has, or if it's like just like a super thick, fast acting, or maybe because this creature is made of smoke, that when it turned into, like, it makes these smoke attacks that can, like, you know, like make tiny versions of stuff and rush into you to make it kind of choke you away faster. There are specifics here, but again, at the end of the day, even if this ability in like the concept is, you know, with all these summons, like even if it's just like a super potent, heavy, thick smoke that can like choke you, and it's like, oh, if you get in it, you're stuck, and it doesn't have any crazy hacks. It's just general smoke. As you have to breathe, it's gonna get you. But even if it's something like that, keep in mind, Yoko seems to have a lot of them, but also these are Selene level people, or I guess not Selene level people, sorry, Selene minion level people. The dragon gods are big. When it comes to someone like, you know, like Doom, you have Doom and you trained him to kind of like be a way more like just durable and technique based, he would be crazy, because they're not just mindless spirits with abilities. They have their own personality, so they could all like train and get stronger and do their own like personal thing, because even though they're enemies, you still got to keep in mind they can still do stuff outside of fights. So the idea of characters getting stronger is always a thing, regardless of what side they're on. And these guys all seem to be like they're way more skilled with their powers. Like we see how fast like Yoko is just mass spam summoning her yokai, and I like her actually, like as a character so far. I don't think that they're gonna like stay down. I'm guessing they're gonna get back up, because if it was they were gonna capture them, or like Yoko was gonna do something that would imply, oh, we're gonna like hold you on for later, and in some form of way, and it gives them time to wake up. But if she's just like gonna feed them to her yokai, there's no way that they're not gonna get up, because they're not gonna just lay there and die, obviously. And if it's like, oh, I'm gonna drag you off and feed you for some reason, I'd be like, why don't you just do it right there? Plus, these are your spirits, like you don't have to take them home. I don't know. It's kind of weird. I don't expect them to actually lose. I think it's just probably one of those things that they're knocked down, they're dizzy, they're trying to kind of collect themselves, because, you know, maybe they're, you know, oxygen deprived. Like I said, it's just one of those powers that's very base rooted, kind of like a really potent poison. Unless you have a specific counter or resistance to it, it's just you know, it's a good hacks at a fundamental level. So these guys have all been really interesting, and I mentioned at the start of the video that I wanted to end it this way. I mentioned at the start of the video, in my theory, I thought it was going to be Lucy focused. But I was like, I didn't know which way 100% was going to go. So I mentioned each of the Moonlit Beauty gods in the predictions and in the thumbnail, and then the chapter ended up being about all of them, because when it started with Lucy, I was like, okay, because it ended with Lucy and Lucy's is the only one-on-one fight, I guess it's going to be Lucy focused, but it was a piece of all of them, and I thought that was just really cool the way it kind of like roped up with my prediction. So I'm pretty hyped for that. I'm pretty hyped to see where this arc goes and what's next in this, because I don't really know what the like overall plan is, because when it comes to the arcs, like getting new powers early off, like not being sure where the power kind of set for the characters are in comparison to the main enemy is really weird now, because we know that the main big bad guy is, but we don't know at all how much more powerful the characters are. There's a lot of questions and mysteries right now in just kind of the base root of 100 Years Quest in the Selene arc. It's really interesting the way that Mishima has this set up. It's kind of like right after the main cast got their second origin unlocked too, now that I think about it, because it's like we know they got stronger, but by how much? And it was a while until we found out, and I'm still okay with that. So I'm happy to see where this goes. Like I said, I really want to see what Mishima has planned and what Mishima really kind of like lays this all out. The Kune fight, I really want to see. I'm really hoping that she has like a really good power and she puts up a good fight against Natsu and Gray, because both of them, I want to see. Well, generally, I want to see both of their like upgraded abilities in L-tier, but I really want to see them have a good duel fight, and I want a good Gray fight, because we just got a good Natsu fight. Like, it was a while ago when you really think about it, but it was at this end of the last arc. It was only what, like 62, like was what 9 chapters ago was when Natsu beat Alderaan, and we haven't had honestly like a good Gray fight in all of 100 years, because we haven't really had a good Gray fight in a long time. I think that the best was like Natsu versus Gray, like, because it was shorter than I wish it like could have been, but it was still choreographed and like display wise had a lot of really good scenes, because he steamrolled over Invo when he got that buff. But you know what I mean, like, Gray, I think Gray fans deserve it, and I want to see that from Gray. Like, I just got some cool stuff for Natsu, so I'd like to see him with Gray stuff, and I want to know what Mimi's power is. Like, I can wait for a description for Akune's and Yoko's, but I want to know Mimi's, because Mimi's can't be just boring. I think that's something I legitimately have really high investments in, and I really don't want it to be boring. And other than that though, comment below, thumbs up the video, but friend the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. So other than that, I appreciate everyone who's already subscribed, and I thank y'all for listening. Bye.